Hans Holbein has claims to be the greatest portrait painter who ever wielded a brush, a central figure in the spread of the Renaissance in Northern Europe, whose deftness and pinpoint accuracy captured the spirit and the faces of his age, an artist whose roots were continental, but who became the father of English painting. Hans Holbein the Younger was born in Germany in the imperial capital of Augsburg in 1498. He came from an artistic family. His father, Hans Holbein the Elder, was one of the leading artists of his generation in southern Germany, and his elder brother, Ambrosius, was already showing a precocious talent for drawing. So, as soon as the two boys could be made use of, they joined their father's workshop. But Augsburg was a lot more limited artistically. But further afield, particularly along the Rhine to the south, things looked a lot more promising. And so in 1515, Hans, together with his older brother, came here to the city that he effectively put on the European artistic map, Basel. Basel was an attractive place for a young artist on the make, a thriving commercial city on the Rhine. It boasted a newly established university and a flourishing collection of printing presses. Books, pamphlets and title pages all need illustration, which Holbein was eager to supply. He was quickly accepted into Basel's intellectual circles, led by the humanist scholar Desiderius Erasmus, and it was a version of Erasmus's In Praise of Folly which gave the young artist an opportunity to show his skills, with a commission to provide illustrations in the margin of the celebrated satirical text which analysed human behaviour and weakness. When he was 18, Holbein got his first illustrious portrait commission to do a picture of the newly elected mayor of Basel, Jakob Mayer von Hasen, and his wife Dorothea. Now, this is a very inventive picture. For a start, it's official, he's just been elected mayor, but the two figures are dressed relatively informally. But also, it's a double portrait that has two distinct images who are separated, and yet they're bound together by the same architectural detail in the background and a consistent light source that casts a shadow in here from the right, that casts shadows on the architectural detail there and there. So what we have is two figures who are unified, but at the same time their own individuality is proclaimed. With Holbein, even from this stage, the detailing is extraordinary. And you look at the rings, numerous rings on the mayor's fingers. It looks like a knuckle duster to our eyes, but actually it's a sign of his own prosperity. He's a financier. He clutches a coin as a symbol of that, but also symbolising the fact that Basel has just been given permission to mint coins. He also points towards his wife in a gesture of love. In a way, it's a rather unglamorous portrait. The background and the detailing is lavish, but these two figures are certainly not made to look particularly attractive. It's as if Holbein is painting them as they are or as they were. But Holbein's also making his own mark, and for the first time, he signs his work, his initials HH and the date, 1516, in a shield or a scroll surrounded by acanthus leaves, as if he's throwing off the shackles of his apprenticeship and emerging for the first time as a fully fledged artist. And in fact, from this moment on, his career takes off. He gets a commission from the mayor to decorate the Basel council chamber, which is subsequently destroyed. But from then on in, other portrait commissions also roll in, including this one of Bonifacius Amerbach, a professor of law at Basel University. This was an important commission for Holbein, for not only was Amerbach a close friend of Erasmus, but he became an important collector of Holbein's works. Here it's clear that his approach was evolving, a rare square format with a landscape adding depth to the image, and the painting containing an inscribed panel proclaiming its own merits. It reads, "I may be painted, unreal, but I am not inferior to life. I am my master's true likeness, as he was at 8 times 3 years." Holbein's growing confidence stemmed in part from his growing acceptance in Basel, where he was made a master of the Guild of Painters. He was also granted citizenship 2 years later after his marriage to a local woman, Elspeth Schmidt, with whom he would have 4 children. Holbein also began to turn his attention to religious images, both for public and private devotion. This altarpiece, showing 8 episodes of Christ's Passion, was begun by Holbein in 1524, some 7 years after an Augustinian monk and scholar called Martin Luther had nailed his 95 theses to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg, railing against the sale of indulgences or pardons from sin by the Catholic Church and triggering a movement which began with the proposed reform of the papacy and ended up splitting the Church, otherwise known as the Protestant Reformation, whose impact throughout Europe was huge. One of the most eloquent examples of painting inspired by the ideas of the Reformation, as well as being one of the most powerful works in the entire history of religious art, is this one, Holbein's image of the dead Christ, painted in 1521. What he does is a paradox, because in a way he's trying to affirm the idea of the Bible and Christ's life as a living force by painting it as graphically as possible, but through showing an image of Christ at his lowest ebb, when he's died and his flesh is beginning to rot and decay. There's all sorts of speculation about the fact that Holbein might have had a body that he found in the Rhine, put in his studio and used directly as a model for this work. But whether that's true or not, dead bodies were much more in evidence in late medieval or early modern Europe, and unlike our world, theirs was not sanitized from the idea and the image of death. What we see is something that's very curious and had art historians speculating for the last few centuries. Is this a commission? Is it the bottom part of an altarpiece? Well, there's no evidence to suggest that it is. And in the end, no records prove that the work was commissioned at all. And what we're left now is the thought that this may be a personal image of private devotion by Holbein. It's a painting that almost smells as you get close up to it, such is its power as a trigger for the imagination. Look at the eyes, how the sockets have become rigid. Rigor mortis is setting in. And what Holbein, I think, is trying to say, and I think achieves, is by showing Christ in this putrefied form, Christ, remember, is the Word made flesh, he's also emphasizing the miracle of the resurrection. He's showing Christ as no artist has done before, at his lowest ebb. And in a way, it's an affirmation of Holbein's own personal faith. It's also a work which establishes him as one of the great talents of 16th century European painting. Of all Holbein's patrons in Basel during his early years, by far and away the most important for his subsequent career was Erasmus, one of the most celebrated scholars of the time. Erasmus's studies in Latin and Greek enabled him to translate the New Testament, which was eventually published in Basel in 1516, where he first came into contact with Holbein, whose intense scrutiny of his subjects seemed to strike a chord with the equally thorough scholar, who commissioned Holbein to produce half a dozen or so portraits